Well, it's a gorgeous morning. A little cooler in some spots than it has been, courtesy of another Canadian air mass, and that's at least for the short term where we're going to be. It's a very straightforward forecast. Hopefully, many of you, especially given a holiday weekend coming up, will find positive. I do want to start though looking back here at where we've been. There was a major severe weather outbreak across portions of the Midwest, the Eastern Corn Belt, but it included, as you can see here, large portions of lower Michigan on Monday late afternoon and evening. We had ahead of a cold front that passed through later on that night, more than one lines of strong to severe thunderstorms. And there were a couple reports of large hail in this outbreak, more than 50 individual claims of damage associated with this. But while there were a couple, again, 1-inch hail reports, the vast majority of these were wind damage, trees taken down that caused them. Well, it caused related damage. At its peak late on Monday evening, more than 300,000 customers, both homes and businesses, were without power. So it was a fairly large outage because of, again, all the high wind damage. But you can see that geographically here, much of the southern half of lower Michigan and then into adjoining areas of northwest Ohio, northern Indiana, northeast Illinois, all of that was associated with the same system, again, on Monday. For the past week, though, we look at the averages. It was warmer than normal. On the left-hand side here, about 1 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than the long-term averages here statewide. And just actually more importantly, depending on where you are, but there was significant precipitation, more than actually a couple major rounds of rainfall. You can see here the swath from west central, northeastward up through central lower and into the northeastern lower peninsula here. 2 inches plus. Some areas got more than 3 or 4 inches. So it was one of the wettest weeks some of those areas have seen the whole growing season. And one other area that also need to mention this as well, eastern upper Michigan saw similar or observed similar totals there as well. Most of the rest of the state areas got 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And I bring this up too because we had, you can probably remember, we had been forecasting or looking maybe at a drier than normal forecast, and that's still the case. But this week in many parts of the state certainly was anything but dry. And one other way of looking at this, especially for some of these areas that picked up 2 and 3 inches, this is probably going to be enough water to put them in through the rest of the remainder of the growing season and into the early fall. That's a positive thing because the theme of the forecast unquestionably is leaning towards a warmer and drier than normal type of scenario. And I'll talk more about that in a second. Given the recent precipitation here, there have been some notable changes in soil moisture. This is the soil moisture in the top 3 feet of the soil profile expressed in terms of a percentile relative to history. You can see that for much of southeastern lower, we're still behind or below normal for where we are this time of the year. But north of that and west of that, you can see an area here from west central northeastward up into northeastern lower. It matches fairly well with that recent precipitation that we do have normal, in some cases even a little bit wetter than normal. And note that there are many places in the upper peninsula where the percentile is above 50. So it's indicating, again, above normal moisture for this time of the year. One other thought with that as well, if you look at the annual cycle of soil moisture here in the top 3 feet, remember that we are now getting close to the annual minimum. That we typically see that here in the fall when we've had depletion and use of water during the growing season. That's when we see the lowest values typically in the profile as a whole, and then the recharge begins here later in the fall and over in the off season into next growing season. But these are all relative to that relatively low time of the year that we have. So still, though, many areas still running drier than they typically do at this time of the year. Degree day totals with a warmer than normal week, the same pattern we've had all growing season here, with surpluses in the far south and some minor deficits in the north continues. You can see that here outlined. The light colors here are surpluses, and those are strongest or largest in southeastern portions of the state, and then some deficits. It amounts to a couple calendar days behind normal. So it isn't a major concern or worry, but we have seen the same spatial pattern across not just Michigan, but all of the upper Midwest here during the 2022 growing season. It likely will end that way as well, odds are. Well, in our forecast, I mentioned a real straightforward one. High pressure from, again, originally from Canada over Ontario and down into Michigan. We've got a stationary frontal boundary here through southwestern portions of the state. This is really nothing more than really a wind shift line, even if that. Very, very weak, not much to say about it. There's no moisture for it to work with. So essentially, it's just, again, a little bit of a wind shift line. On the satellite time lapse here, you can see there are a few clouds in places, especially up across central and eastern upper Michigan, but it's with the high pressure here and sinking air, it's a gorgeous morning. Temperatures in the 50s in most areas. We even have a couple of upper 40s in the far northern part of the state. So a very, very nice, we'll call it an early fall for the first day of September here. Conditions. All of the moisture and on the weather map here, you can see still confined down in the Gulf region. That same area of low pressure with all sorts of moisture from the Gulf still down there, still causing issues, and that's likely to continue to be the case over the next couple of years. Or how about next couple of days? We won't go that far out. No promises. By tomorrow morning, you can see Michigan still under high pressure. We will be looking because of this high pressure, gorgeous conditions today. High temperatures mostly in the mid and upper 70s to low 80s, a couple degrees warmer than it was yesterday. That'll be notable. And by tomorrow, as you can see, the high moves off to our east. We'll get return flow more out of the southwest. It will probably lead to, well, certainly a noticeable increase in temperatures. Tomorrow, we will see mid and upper 80s in many parts of the state, especially across the lower peninsula with a little bit windier conditions out of the southwest. But our temperatures will be, again, couple degrees warmer than they have been. And the next weather system here of note, which is this cold front in an area of low pressure over northern Ontario, that approaches here from the west. Now, that's going to lead to, later in the day on Friday, the chance for showers and some scattered thunder showers, mainly across upper Michigan. Some of it may move into the far northern parts of lower Michigan here late tomorrow night or early Saturday. But I think right now, at least for tomorrow, any precipitation will be confined to, especially to the central and eastern upper peninsula overnight Friday into early Saturday morning. Mostly dry to the south of that. If you're going to be at the kickoff game here for the Spartans at Spartan Stadium Friday night at 7 o'clock, gorgeous conditions, more of the late summer variety weather than the fall weather, looking at temperatures in the 70s, falling into the upper 60s by maybe late in the game, but just gorgeous night for football. So that's not an issue at all for, again, if you're going to be there in person in East Lansing. And then by Saturday morning, you can see that front, which had been moving to the south and east, it begins to slow down and stall out. There's a little bit of, you can see precipitation associated with this, but the bottom line here is, and this has come up in the forecast guides over the last couple of days. 2 or 3 days ago, this system looked like it had a lot more precipitation with it than it does now, at least the guides are suggesting. So as we get closer to the event, there's going to be a major difference from north to south. The best chances for rainfall here tomorrow into Saturday will be across upper Michigan and then decrease significantly as you go south. So by the time we're getting down to southern lower on Saturday, which is when the greatest threat would be, only looking at probabilities maybe 20 or 30%. So scattered, we'll call it scattered officially, maybe isolated would be a better word. So not looking at much in the way of rainfall. That system then basically it scrubs out. It ceases to exist by Sunday, and we go back into a dry pattern into the beginning of next week. However, note behind this, a big H here, another Canadian high pressure system that will bring noticeably cooler air once again, beginning in the upper peninsula on Saturday and then spreading to the rest of the state on Sunday. So it'll be setting the stage for our Labor Day weekend here coming up, at least the middle and latter part of it, Sunday, Monday, and even into Tuesday, looking at really nice conditions, but cooler temperatures, highs highs on Saturday, actually, in parts of upper Michigan, probably won't get out of the 60s, but for most of the state, we will see highs back down into the 70s and continue there, maybe 80 by Tuesday of early next week. Lows falling back to the upper 40s in the north and 50s across much of the rest of the state. So seasonably cool, or maybe a little bit below normal for the early part of next week. And just as importantly, more importantly, after Saturday, really no sign of any rainfall until maybe latter part of next week. And if we look at that, actually, our for forecast precipitation totals, you can see something significant, maybe a quarter to a half an inch in portions of eastern upper Michigan. That's the bullseye. That's the most we see, and that's below normal even for that area. But for much of the rest of the state, less than a quarter, in some cases less than a tenth. So we may be looking at basically almost a completely dry week here coming up, with a little bit of a temperature roller coaster, warming here into the early weekend and then cooling back down for the early part of next week. Even given the cooler temperatures expected early next week with lots of sunshine, evaporative demand is forecast to be above normal. These are totals for the week here for potential evapotranspiration and water management, and they suggest, again, an inch to 1.2 inches totals, which would be above normal for early September. So again, if you're still keeping the water on, that's something you're probably going to want to look at, because it is a little bit above what we would typically see here for this time of the year. Moving into the medium range and even in the longer range here, 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day outlooks have been consistent over the last several days. You see the 6 to 10 day here, and essentially they call for return of warmer than normal weather. You can see for much of the lower 48 states here, including Michigan. And the other message, of course, is also drier than normal. And that has been consistent for some time now. Looking into September, we did get an updated 30-day outlook for the month of September here. And of course, we looked at the last one, the original issuance of this last week. And there's a little bit of a change. Guess what? The change is it's a little bit warmer and a little bit drier than the original. So the update that comes at the end of the calendar month, and you see that here on the top, mean temperatures forecast to be warmer than normal with the below normal. And again, I think the biggest change since last week, the original version of this, is that all of the state is again in that below normal or drier than normal category, and it was not. Only parts of it were last week at the original one. So the forecast guidance again has pointed more strongly in that warm and dry direction, and that's certainly what we're looking at probably for a good chunk of the first half of September, maybe longer than that. And so wrapping up here, as I mentioned, a very straightforward and for most activities, this is going to be a very favorable forecast. We've got some of our crops reaching or will be reaching maturity soon. Some even be as Monica mentioned, some are even the harvests are even starting here, and these conditions would be very, very favorable for most of those activities and operations. Really the only chance for rain here, again, coming up tomorrow and into Saturday, and even that is not looking at like a major chance, especially for the southern part of the state, and then cool and dry for early next week, warming up as we move through the week next week. So again, very, very basic, straightforward type of, and I think one in which there's more confidence than normal in for this time of the year. And with that, I will invite you for next week, our virtual breakfast next Thursday, which is the 8th of September. Hard to believe how fast these days are going. We're going to have our own MSU Extension soybean specialist, Mike Staten, with us. And he'll have a very timely topic, and that's going to be, he'll be talking about reducing soybean harvest losses with that season rapidly coming upon all of us. And so I'll stop there, and Monica, can turn it back to you and or Phil.